Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 540. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 5. Within the space of darkness, as if the curtains had come down on the last act, Han Suyang opened her eyes within this darkness. The Eye of Truth expanded and began emitting faint rays of light, and gradually, she could see her surroundings better. Just what happened? You have misaligned and broke the world line's deciding probability. Your actions have affected the most ancient dreams. The most ancient dreams is changing. Then, indecipherable messages floated up next. But none of that mattered. What's important was rescuing Kim Dokja. Han Suyang focused her sight to the presence she picked up in front of her. When she did, something sooty, darkish could be spotted. Yu Hyok, is that you? Yes. Han Suyang felt around like a blind and approached him, only to freak out and shout loudly. Hey, you moron! What the hell are you doing, choking a little kid? This is not a little kid. It's Kim Dokja. It's Kidafeed Kim Dokja. She hurriedly snatched Kim Dokja away from him and brought her finger closer to the small nose. She felt a very faint, shallow breathing. But why was this? Something about his current state felt wrong. Just what was up with this feeling that he might shatter into pieces at any second? What's wrong with him? His fable has been damaged too extensively. I've already fed him the life and death pill, but it's not working. They needed Isiolwa. However, none of the presences of their companions could be felt nearby. It seemed that only Yu Hyok, Kim Dokja, and herself were trapped within this separate space. With hostile eyes, Han Suyang glared at her surroundings. There was only one culprit capable of doing something like this. The fourth wall. Stop this and let us leave. Along with Suchachit noise, a faint, blurry silhouette appeared within the darkness. A boy Dakibi wearing a fedora was standing there. Its face was filled with indescribable sadness and purity. Han Suyang studied the fourth wall for a little while before asking it. Is that your real appearance? T-hat S-re-GHT. It no longer resembled the figure she had spied within her memories. Not a sign of a middle-aged Dakibi could be seen on that face. The fourth wall addressed her. Areallylongti Miha Espa said bye. Han Suyang thought about something. Maybe, the fourth wall was in the same boat as Kim Dokja. It too could have forgotten everything and gradually turned into a child while enduring the untold length of time. While fixing Kim Dokja's clothing, Han Suyang asked. You were protecting Kim Dokja because of my order, weren't you? ITHINKIW as. You gave Kim Dokja the Ways of Survival text files, right? You kept helping him out afterwards, too. The fourth wall didn't reply. No, it just stared at Kim Dokja with vague eyes of someone digging through very old memories. Han Suyang's voice now took on the subtle hint of anger. But, why did you let Kim Dokja end up in this state? Say something. What were you even thinking to let? You don't know what the reader really wants. The fourth wall no longer stammered its words. You all truly do not know anything. We'll be taking Kim Dokja with us. We can't sit back and watch this guy live his life as the most ancient dream. At her attitude of willing to start a fight, the fourth wall's brows quivered. But rather than Han Suyang clenching her fist in nervousness, Yu Hyok stepped forward, instead. If we take him with us, will the position of the most ancient dream be left vacant? Han Suyang's shoulders flinched. It wasn't as if she had never thought about that problem. The problem of after Kim Dokja is rescued, who will take over the position of the most ancient dream? This world was maintained solely because the most ancient dream dreamed. In a universe operated only through someone's sacrifice, someone had to become the existence who dreamed. Yu Hyok opened his mouth. I shall take over. What the? Hey! What bullshit are you spewing now? I'm trying to say that I will become the new most ancient dream. How can you pull that off when you don't even have an iota of imagination? No, let me do it. I can do it so much better than this Kim Dokja here. That's why. Han Suyang yapped on and on, even though she didn't really understand what her mouth was saying. She simply blurted out only with the aim of stopping this crazy idiot. And fortunately enough, the fourth wall wasn't Yu Young-hyuk's ally in this case either. Puppet of the most ancient dream, you can't become the dream. Because you don't love this story. In that case, I must dash. It's the same story for you, Han Suyang. Then who's going to take over this guy's role? I'm telling you this right now, but we're definitely taking him with us, you hear? Even if it's you, you can't stop us. The fourth wall stared at Han Suyang and Yu Young-hyuk for a little while. Take him. What's that? You can just take him. Even if you take away that Kim Dokja, this universe won't be destroyed anymore. As she didn't expect to hear such a reply, Han Suyang could only blink her eyes like an idiot. She glanced to her side, and even Yu Young-hyuk was making a similar face. Just what was the Dakibi saying here? She had never thought of such an ending. Was it really okay to welcome a conclusion of this nature? No, that simply wasn't possible. This star stream was never considerate towards any of them before, not even once. Han Suyang's face gradually hardened and she asked back. Why won't the universe be destroyed even after we take him away? The Kim Dokja has scattered to the rest of the universe already. What was that? She dazedly stared at Kim Dokja currently embraced in her arms, at his frail figure, small enough for only one of her arms to wrap around. It felt like a hammer had struck her on the back of her head. It couldn't be. The reason why Kim Dokja ended up in this state was you. Just what the hell did you do? This wasn't my doing. It's what he himself wanted. After all, he knew your group would do something like this. A subtle chill began running down her skin. In order to save this world, someone must become the most ancient dream. If Kim Dokja was saved, then someone else must replace him. Wouldn't he? Would someone like Kim Dokja really not know that? You all have done something terribly stupid. The conclusion the reader wanted was the only conclusion. Why did you try to change it? The expression of the fourth wall staring at her gave her the creeps. A negative emotion that was neither hatred or resentment, not even sadness, was now directed in her and Yu Young-hyuk's direction. You shouldn't have been greedy. No, YOUSHLDVEBN con TE and TYTH 49% Kim Dokja. Along with the voice gradually breaking apart, the surrounding time and space began to distort. DIDYOU REALIT and KYOUR grow up W as SPE SIL? DIDYO UHANI STLY BEL ETH at a proper conclusion will old WAT for YOU lot WHN YOU to STR oid the laws of TH is universe. Even before she could reply, the surroundings grew brighter. YOU lot ha VME SS ed up YOUR con CLU shaun, and YOUYLL no WB kami me SERA blee. When Han Suyang opened her eyes again, she found herself standing in Seoul, Gwangwaman of the 1865th regression turn. The very location where her group readied for the scenario. Snow was drifting down on this landmark that had seen the last conclusion of the scenarios. She quietly looked up at the snowflakes falling one by one. She slowly lowered her gaze and saw the small Kim Dokja, still nestled within her embrace. His breathing remained rhythmic. Master. E.G. Hai ran towards them from a distance. Even Yu Sang-ah and Zhang Huiwan urgently running next to her could be seen, too. The rest of the companions were safe. Suyang SSI. What about Dokja SSI? Even before Han Suyang could say something, Jang Haiyang quickly snatched away and hugged Kim Dokja. Kim Dokja. His hand, it's as cold as ice. Does anyone have gloves? The companions quickly surrounded Kim Dokja. Each of them was drunk in their own emotions. Zhang Huiwan holding on to Kim Dokja's pale smooth cheeks were crying, while Hyun-sung and his bear-like bulk were cautiously wrapping Kim Dokja's naked feet. Even Yoo Sang-ah couldn't hold back her tears this time. Both Shin Yoo-sung and Lee Gil-young seemed to be moments away from passing out, too. The figure of Gong Pil-do sitting on a nearby bench could be seen, busy puffing away at his cigarette as if such a spectacle was too ridiculous to even participate. Is Dokja sleeping now? Lee Soo-jae asked that, and Han Soo-young nodded as her reply. That small movement was all she could do after squeezing out every dollop of her remaining energy. Companions finally managed to rein in their emotions and began to talk in turns. The first one to step up while rolling up her sleeves was Jong Hui-won. I'm really going to dangle him up this time. Right in front of the industrial complex, no less. I'm not joking here, so all of you, do not try to stop me. Even still, the current Dokja SSI is a child. By the way, will a juicy remain in this state forever? Hyung, wake up, please. You're pretending to be asleep because of how embarrassed you are, right? Did he get younger as a side effect of something? Lee Ji-hai, hesitating ever so slightly, suddenly shouted out in a bright voice. Who cares if he got younger? We can just raise him, right? Does that mean I can go to the same school as Hyung? Hey, you think a juicy really became a little kid like you? And so, for the next couple of minutes, they bickered and bantered like this. In the meantime, Lee Seol-hwa was checking out Kim Dokja's current condition throughout his body, but as she did, her expression was slowly hardening. When Dokja Juicy wakes up, he's going to remember us, right? It won't be like he's lost most of his memories or anything? Han Soo-young couldn't say a single thing to such companions. She kept bobbing her lips up and down many times. It wasn't a certainty yet, they couldn't trust everything that stinking wall said, that's why they... You too. Why have you been keeping quiet until now? Han Soo-young hurriedly avoided meeting the gaze after hearing Yoo Sang-ah's question. Soo-young SSI? Soon afterwards, Yoo Sang-ah's gaze shifted over to Yoo Young-hyuk. And then, she got to witness a shocking scene. Yoo Young-hyuk SSI? Yoo Young-hyuk's expression was frozen pale white. And as if he had lost a protective wall of his mind, he seemed to be muttering something to himself, too. Yoo Sang-ah had seen such a sight before. Back in the 73rd Demon World, when Kim Dokja ceased to exist alongside the outer god. She quickly brushed past the companions and held Kim Dokja's wrist. It was so frail that it might break at any second. The pulse itself was faint, too. However, she wasn't a doctor, so this didn't tell her much. She asked Lee Seol-hwa next. Seol-hwa SSI, the current Dokja SSI, what's wrong? His soul has been completely damaged. His soul was damaged. In that moment, a similar type of shadow was cast over the companions' complexions. However, that didn't last long. Jong Hui-won spoke up first. I'm sure there is a way, right? I mean, we cured something like that before. Indeed, they had experienced a similar event to this in the past. The damage to one's soul meant damage to one's fable, damage to one's theme. Lee Soo-jae had survived such an illness before. Shin Yoo-sung hurriedly followed that up. There really is no problem, right? It's not the same as back then. We can get help from this world's Aileen. And we also secured a lot of star fluid ahead of time too, didn't we? Shin Yoo-sung continued to speak. She brought up all the ways she could think of without rest, over and over again. And then... That's why. Tears formed on both of her eyes. Shin Yoo-sung continued to shake her head in denial, saying this couldn't be it. Yoo Sang-ah cautiously wrapped her arm around the girl's shoulders and spoke. Please be honest with us, Seol-hwa SSI. Lee Seol-hwa dropped her head lower, and placed her hand on Kim Dokja's chest. When she did, a small piece of fable fragment floated up from his frail-looking chest. That was the last remaining fable of Kim Dokja. Constellation, Demon King of Salvation, has reached his new. His small fable glimmered like a very tiny phrase. Constellation Demon King of Salvations is epilogue. And so, they had reached the epilogue no one had written. Chapter 541. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 6. They immediately took Kim Dokja back to their headquarters located in Gwangwoman. Aileen was summoned, and they even requested aid from the constellations with expertise in medicine, such as Guam Divine Doctor. Their plan was perfect. With this plan, they couldn't have failed. They even called upon every fable expert scattered throughout the world, too. This plan was the one where they couldn't afford to fail. For the period of over a week, dozens of famed doctors were brought in to treat Kim Dokja. It was to collect the remaining fables somehow and restore his soul form. There is nothing that can be done currently. Isiolwa worked throughout the night and as a result, passed out. A Russian expert subbing for her afterwards said these words. "We can't say he's dead, but we also can't say that he's alive either. This child will never wake up again, that's why." But that couldn't be. They worked tirelessly and finally managed to come this far, so this story simply couldn't end like this. The one to stay as the pillar of support for the crumbling companions was Yu Sang-ah. The problem is with Dokja Ssi's soul, yes? In that case, they only needed to restore his soul, then. So, the companions sought out the assistance of the constellation most well-versed in everything soul-related. This child's soul didn't come to the underworld. No, his soul didn't go to any of the afterlives found in the other worldviews. The queen of the underworld, Persephone, could only stroke Kim Dokja's forehead with a sorrowful expression. This was this child's choice. His choice? Please don't make me laugh. You also saw it too, didn't you? Back in that subway, we all saw the fables Dokja Ssi possessed, didn't we? He wanted to be with us, he wanted to us to save. There are countless fables within a person's soul. The words we saw were simply a small part of that. Don't say something like that as if it means nothing. Zhang Huiwan shouted out. There was no other way for her to endure except to shout. It was his choice? This was Kim Dokja's choice? The companions didn't give up. Even the collecting of fables, even the recovery of his soul, they were impossible. In that case, only one method remained. I was waiting for you. The master of the Isle of Reincarnators, Sakyamuni, welcomed them with a benevolent smile, as if he knew they would come here. It's truly lamentable, but he's not someone this one can reincarnate. A portion of his soul still remains. We can divide and share the fables we all possess. Just like how I did it back then, if we utilize the powers of samsara. Ah, my dear Arhat. I understand your sorrow. I do. However, he can't be reincarnated. Sakyamuni looked at Yu Sang-ah with a regretful expression before letting a soft sigh escape from his lips. Soon, a truly countless number of threads began floating up before his eyes that observed Kim Dokja quietly slumbering away. There were so many of these red threads that counting them all was impossible. Yu Sang-ah too could see them. The threads of fate. The threads stretched out to the night sky and eventually, even pierced through Starstream itself. Yu Sang-ah stared at them and realized why Kim Dokja couldn't be reincarnated. I see. She didn't want to acknowledge it. Even then, the truth didn't change. His soul, it has already reincarnated in another world line. Sakyamuni nodded his head. More correctly, we should say his soul's . Asterisk. In front of everyone, Han Suyang passed on the things she'd been told. Kim Dokja's soul has been scattered throughout the whole universe. The memories from the moments when she faced off against the fourth wall, inside the darkened room, she didn't leave a single word out and repeated every part of that conversation to her companions. Someone fell down, some despaired. E.G. Hai cried out. Let's go find that guy again. The fourth wall might know a way, right? We might be able to recover Dokja Jusi's soul somehow. If you do that, then what about Kim Dokja's reincarnating in other worlds? They must be living their own lives, won't they? That is, E.G. Hai panting like a bull gulped down a glass of water on the table, before carrying on. There must be some other way. Whatever that thing was, the fourth wall, or whatever, you said it knows something. We don't have any methods to meet that guy again. We used up all of our fragments when opening the wall. Another 4 days flew by in an instant. The companions had become utterly devastated, ravaged, some missed their meals, while some didn't even bother to sleep. How long passed by like that? Zhang Huiwan sought out Yu Yonghyuk. Yonghyuk SSI. Yu Yonghyuk, polishing his dark heavenly demon sword, out of an old habit raised his head. He frowned slightly as if the sunlight stung, before shifting his gaze back to the sword. No matter how much he polished it, the dark stain on the blade didn't want to come off. The stain came from Kim Dokja's letters that he cut down. He quietly stared at the stain, before finally opening his mouth. 4 days is quite fast for making up your mind. That's because we don't have any other choice. Yu Yonghyuk's emotionless eyes locked on to Zhang Huiwan. Despite experiencing so many tragedies until now, her eyes still burned vigorously. He too used to have such eyes, once upon a time. We can do this. We've already done it twice. That's why dash. Zhang Huiwan shouted. Yu Yonghyuk used to think that. Their plan was like a well-constructed fantasy. They believed that they can pull it off this time, that they should be able to see the conclusion they wanted. Even if this world ends in tragedy. Don't think that you've all failed. Did that fool feel this way back then? Yu Yonghyuk spoke up. Right. We did do it. Please, let's try it one more time. We can definitely pull it off this time. We can definitely save Dokja SSI. Do not think that things will turn out better than this turn just because you went back in time. After spitting out those words reflexively, Yu Yonghyuk stopped breathing for a little while. Why are you saying such things? This turn was a definite improvement, wasn't it? We can definitely do better. It's impossible. Why not? When we haven't even tried it. Yu Yonghyuk didn't reply. Her expression grew deeply incensed. Her hand then gripped the sword, implying that she'd not hesitate to cut him down if he didn't cooperate immediately. Even then, even under her intense threat, he didn't budge an inch. Seeing him act like this, something else slowly floated up on her expression. You. Can it be? Yu Yonghyuk still didn't reply. Zhang Huiwan began urging him in sheer disbelief. Is it true? Is it? He finally replied while staring at his own attribute window floating before his eyes. I'm no longer the regressor. The category of regressor no longer existed among his attributes. His stigmata had vanished, too, both regression and group regression. He didn't possess any stigma to turn back the clock. Winds began blowing in from somewhere. While letting the winds hit him, Yu Yonghyuk looked up at the clear skies of Starstream. He couldn't sense the gaze he used to feel all the time. No matter how much he sharpened his perception, he simply couldn't locate it like before. He was no longer the protagonist of the story. His story came to an end when the lone reader went away. Along with his final regression, too. Asterisk, we can cross over to another world line. And then, someone said something like that. It doesn't really have to be a regression, does it? We cross the world line, and enter the location of a different scenario. We then gather the fragments of final wall one more time and meet the fourth wall. It was a crazy plan. What made it even crazier was the fact that the person suggesting it was none other than the usually composed Yu Sang-ah. Han Suyang replied. That guy might not even help us. Even still, we need to try. It's better than not trying, right? They had already done it once before. No reason not to try it again. But why was this? Han Suyang didn't believe that this was the right way to go. What would happen to them if they fail this time, too? Wouldn't they try to skip over the world line again? And just like that, they would cross the world lines again, and again. By continuing that, they might end up no different from the 999th turns outer gods. Their lives might get damaged beyond repair. The truly wretched thing was, despite knowing the truth she couldn't fight against the temptation. How will you cross the world line, anyway? We can't regress anymore, remember? And we don't even have the secretive plotter to help us in this place either. Have you forgotten? This world line is different from the 1864th turn. It was at that moment something, a certain thought, brushed past Han Suyang's mind. There was one more method. Accompanied by the thunderous "gu-gu-gu-gu" noise, a gigantic shadow was cast upon Guangwoman right then. It came from a massive flying object large enough to completely blanket the main street and then some. Fu. Long time no see, everyone. Bai Hyung was riding on that flying object. He had become the Dakibi king of this world after the bureau was completely ruined. And it seemed that this ruined world was exactly to his liking. Right, so you need this thing, is that it? That was the item only found in the last scenario. The final Arkansas. Han Suyang slowly approached the ark. Without a doubt, using this would allow them to jump the world line. Well, Dakibis and constellations of the very last scenario were also planning to escape to another world line using this vessel, after all. Yu Sangha spoke up. However, if we use this, we'll end up being no different to Dakibis. You should have raised such points before we used the group regression, you know. Han Suyang reached the ark. That prompted Bai Hyung to issue a warning. Let me make this crystal clear. This ark is a lot older than it looks, so it can be used only once. Doesn't matter. Being able to travel to another world line implied that they could use this ark in a similar capacity as Yu Yonghyok's own regression. What if they could move to another world line specific point in history? If they could do something like that, then they might be able to change world lines in a far more efficient, effective manner than Yu Yonghyok's regression. Han Suyang hurriedly shouted out. Bai Hyung. The world line we want to go to is. However, even before she could finish, a message came to her first. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. Bai Hyung's expression became confused. What's gotten into it? I don't think it has ever said something like this before. What's wrong? Is it broken? Call out a different world line. Han Suyang spoke up again. That resulted in yet another message. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. She repeatedly mentioned other world lines. She spoke, then spoke again. However, the message floating up remained the same. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. It's impossible to set sail to the applicable world line. Utterly flustered now, Bai Hyung began muttering out. Passageways to all those world lines have been closed off. It means the possibilities that used to be open between the world lines have completely shut down. We can't go? Looks that way. Can something like this even happen? All the world lines related to the ways of survival, the ones she could remember, were blocked off. Does that mean we can't go anywhere? No, there is one. Really? Which one? But, it's a world line with all the scenarios already concluded. Bai Hyung displayed the entered route. Surprisingly enough, the destination was a location they all knew quite intimately. Yu Yonghyok's 1864th regression turn. The planetary system number 8612, where all the scenarios had already ended. It was Earth. The one they left from. Chapter 542. Epilogue 4. The Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Part 7. The ending to the 1865th regression turn was more perfect than any other world lines. A month flew by after the conclusion of the final scenario. The damages suffered from the scenarios were quickly repaired, and through the help of the regressors, various nations regained their law and order quite quickly. Schools opened their doors again, and workers started going back to their old jobs. The streets were filled to the brim with slogans welcoming the brand new world. E.G. Hai, standing on this alien-feeling street, stared at an athletics field across the fence. That's your friend, isn't she? Zhang Huiwan asked, and Yi Jihai nodded her head. The latter's friend was currently running on the track. Her name was Nabori. A friend that she had to kill with her own hands, and that very person was alive and well in this world line. She was alive, she was breathing, and her legs were moving. Jihaya. You don't have to go back. Yi Jihai's eyes continued to chase after Bori's back. The friend she missed so much. The friend that appeared in the nightmares she always suffered from. She thought that rescuing Bori would bring her nightmares to an end. Unfortunately, memories couldn't be so easily exorcised like that. No, her nightmare returned with vengeance in a far more vivid form. Within it, she'd lived the same scenario many, many times over and murdered the dream version of Bori. Every time that happened, she'd come to realize something, over and over again. The one she rescued this time wasn't the dead Bori. That the one she saved was simply another Bori from another world line, that was all. Jihaya. Yi Jihai stared at the athletics field for a long time before making her reply. We made a promise with Bu, after all. We did promise that we will definitely cross the world lines again and return home. Zhang Huiwan quietly studied Yi Jihai's face while the girl said that, then placed her hand on the latter's shoulder. I'm sure it will get lonely once we return. Things that exist here don't on the other side, after all. Yi Jihai smiled. She used the hand that wiped away at her eyes and pointed to her head. I won't be lonely. Because they are all in here. Her voice trembled as she said that. Was it fine to say something like that? If she could really say something like that, then why did they even bother to come to this place, to begin with? Let's go. This Yoni will treat you to something tasty today. Asterisk. Or Bioni. Whenever Yumiya used that term, there would be something she wanted to ask him for. Yu Yonghyuk knew that after going through many regressions. She quietly stared her older brother, before opening her mouth. Or Bioni, you did your very best. No one can do more or better than what you have already done. His eyelids were solemnly lowered. Yumiya climbed up on a chair and placed her hand on the crown of his head. Let's stop and go back home. Asterisk. The scenario of tragedy they had to live through. The world was enveloped in the acrid smoke of the apocalypse's cannons, and they had lost their precious ones. The lyrics of a song coming from somewhere caused Han Suyang to frown quite heavily. Is this a funeral dirge or something? No, it's actually a trending song these days. A story that exalts you and your group. The cackling Baihyung opened the door to the ark. The vessel, with its fable energy fully recharged, greeted them. One by one, regressors who chose to return home climbed aboard the vessel. Not everyone chose to do so, however, some decided to remain. Such as, Gong Pildu unable to say anything while sweating profusely. Behind him, young children could be seen. Han Suyang knew why he regressed in the first place. You should remain here. Someone needs to stay and protect this place, after all, said Han Suyang. Gong Pildu didn't reply to her. Anyone else wanting to stay behind? Han Suyang calmly raised her voice. You should give it some serious thought, okay? If you leave, then your parents, lovers, friends, etc. You will never get to see them ever again. Will you be fine with that? So, think it over. Shin Yusung then grabbed Han Suyang's hand tightly. This isn't our world line, you know? Dokja Juicy will probably think that way, too. The majority of Kim Dokja Company's incarnations and constellations chose to return. In the middle of them all was young Kim Dokja lying on the stretcher, unmoving. Oh, my dear Persephone, are you really planning to leave me? Han Suyang could only smile wryly after witnessing Hades, unable to mop around any longer, started his desperate Songyan dance to appeal to his dearly beloved. Was Hades's personality originally like that? Persephone directed her troubled smile at such Hades. I'm truly sorry, Hades. But, I'm not the Persephone you used to know. You're undoubtedly Persephone. The queen of the darkest spring and the underworld. Persephone softly shook her head. If you insist on doing this, I shall go with you. This is your world line, dear. And you're also the king of the underworld, too. Please, don't forget your dignity. But my world is you, Persephone. Baihyang shook his head helplessly. And then, asked Han Suyang. I'm sure there's no point in me asking, but... Hey, are you really leaving? If you stay, you know you will be treated like a king for the rest of your life. I didn't come to this world line for that purpose. Han Suyang looked at the young Kim Dokja lying on the stretcher. For the last few months, Han Suyang and her colleagues immersed themselves in scouring the entirety of Star Stream to find a way to revive Kim Dokja. However, they couldn't locate anything like that. The best they could do was to keep his life going like this, not dead but not alive either. Baihyang. As a goodbye present, why don't you share a bit of the Bureau's fable with us? The Bureau's fable? The system in our world line is destroyed, you see. We don't know what might happen, so give us a little bit, okay? Baihyang pouted with a very unhappy face, but eventually, handed down a portion of the fable to Han Suyang. It was then, a man dashed towards them from afar while kicking up a storm of dust clouds. A big man with unkempt bushy beard on his face, as a matter of fact. It was Lee Hyun-sung. Hurry and start the engines. He shouted out. When they took a closer look, military vehicles could be seen angrily chasing after him. Now that I think about it, he's still a wanted man, isn't he? Han Suyang wryly chuckled and gave her signal. That prompted Yu Young-hyuk to open his mouth. We're departing. At last, the final arc was taking to the skies. The heroes of Kim Dokja Company are now setting off on their journey. People were looking up at them. Helicopters from TV stations gathered around and broadcast their departure. Reporters shouted as the cameras zoomed in closer to the companions' faces. Why are you all crying? You have managed to save this world line. The view of the ground progressively grew further away. Someone among them muttered out. What did we come here for, I wonder? Like an episode of a horrible nightmare, the world below was growing distant. It was becoming memories, a past that couldn't be turned back. Han Suyang muttered out. What do you mean, why? As the arc accelerated, the surrounding view changed. The galaxies of the world lines streamed past them quickly. And Kim Dokja, having reincarnated, must have been living his life in a distant world line somewhere. When Han Suyang thought like that, she felt this really powerful urge. What if she tried to forcibly change the route, even if it was now? What would happen if they embarked on a journey to meet Kim Dokja's reincarnated form somewhere within those distant stars? If she did, if they could do it, then... However, was that what Kim Dokja really wanted? The ark's window reflected the faces of Yu Young-hyuk and Yu Sang-ah walking up next to her almost at the same time. They too carried the exact same expression as hers, staring at the exact same view as her. The moment she saw their faces, she realized something. She realized that they were thinking the same thing as her. And that was why that plan could never come to reality. It was then, the ark started thumping and clonking next. The vessel has entered a new world line. Already? Isn't this way too? As if it was entering the atmosphere, the ark began to suddenly nosedive. It felt as if gravity itself had disappeared for a second there, but then, the vessel's hull slammed into something with a loud explosive noise. The light within the interior went out for a moment before coming back on. The vessel has reached the destination. Han Suyang held her pulsing head and scanned her companions. Damn it, never mind being old, it's a bloody antique, this thing. Is everyone alright? I'm fine. What about the others? Thankfully, no one was hurt. Han Suyang manipulated the hull and opened up an exit. The door slowly opened, and a flight of stairs extended below it. She cautiously walked down the steps, and the moment her feet touched the ground, someone's voice resounded out. Who are you people? What was going on here? Fully armed soldiers were pointing their guns at her and the group. Lee Hyun-sung, jumping up in fright, hurriedly hid behind her. Suyang SSI. What's going on here? Even here, they can't be trying to arrest me. Of course, that's not possible. This is our home, after all, said Han Suyang. She shoved Yi Hyun-sung back, and then addressed the soldiers. Hey, don't you think your welcoming party to celebrate our return is a bit too rough? Don't you know who I am? The guns hurriedly took aim at her as she strode forward like a neighborhood thug. I'm warning you. You pull the trigger on that thing, then all of you will. It was then, Han Suyang's eyes caught the face of a certain someone. It was a middle-aged woman's face, setting off this vague déjà vu as if she could just about recognize it. The blonde locks were tumbling down to the woman's shoulders, and her crimson eye was swirling in a red vortex. The owner of that eye addressed her. Han Suyang? Han Suyang dazedly stared at the blonde woman. That voice. Some time had passed by, but she could never forget it. The middle-aged woman issued the order to stand down with a flick of her hand. Han Suyang. Is it really you? When she heard that voice again, Han Suyang felt something welling up inside her. While slowly descending to the ground, she kept staring back at Anna Croft. She didn't know where to start asking her questions, so she asked whatever jumped out of her mouth first. How many years has it been since we left? It's been 20 years. Han Suyang's trembling lips swallowed those years down. She felt dizzy. Who would have believed now that the horrifying scenarios had ever taken place in this world? The city of Seoul was no longer the place she remembered. No, this city was as complete as the one from the 1865th turn, the one she thought was pretty much perfect. The deep greenery of the trees lining the streets, and children dribbling balls around in the distant playground far away. 20 years. So, that's what it was. In a world where we don't exist, you have managed to carry on. And that's how you got to change the world to this extent. Han Suyang? The startled Anna Croft quickly offered support as Han Suyang wobbled unsteadily. This was an embrace from a person she didn't even like, yet Han Suyang clung onto those shoulders and broke down in tears. At last, they had returned to the 1864th turn. The world where they completed the scenarios for the first time. Some managed to return, while some couldn't. Some things had to remain as the past that nothing could change. She saw the site of the industrial complex spreading out in the far distance. Kim Dokja's fading bronze statue stood before it. Next to his figure, assuming a slightly awkward pose, was a massive statue of a squid. To commemorate Kim Dokja's return. While looking at that bizarre monstrosity of a squid, Han Suyang alternated between breathless sobbing and hysterical laughter. She didn't want to admit it. If she insisted on it, then she felt that something somewhere might change, somehow. But right now, right in this moment, she simply had to admit to it. Their plan was a failure. And this place, it was the conclusion to the world they had found. Asterisk. 2 years went by since the companion's return. 2 years were a longer stretch of time than one might imagine, and perhaps fittingly, several incidents happened during then. Such as Yi Hyun-sung and Jang Hui-won leaving the complex. Or, Shin Yu-sung and Lee Gilyong entering high school. Yi Ji-hai getting slapped with an F during the first midterms. Etc., etc. When all these many incidents were to be summarized, it'd be like the following. Kim Dokja Company had been disbanded.